When you think about the United States today, you think global superpower. But it wasn't always like that, not even close. Go back just a little over a century, and America was what we'd call a developing nation. So how on earth did that happen? How did it go from that to, well, that in just a few decades? That's the story we're going to unpack.
So, how does a country even build a superpower? Well, maybe the best way to think about it is like a massive construction project. You're building something huge, block by block. Some of it is planned. Some of it is just pure luck. The real question is, what were those blocks? What was the foundation?
Okay, so let's start with the absolute foundation. The first block, the one everything else is built on top of. It wasn't some brilliant idea or a new invention. Nope, it was the land.
I mean, think about it. Before a single law was passed, before a single factory was built, the geography of the United States handed it this just massive head start. And we're not talking about a small leg up here. This was a total game changer, right from the very beginning.
So what are we talking about here? Well, first off, you've got these two enormous oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific. They're basically giant moats, making it incredibly hard for anyone to invade. Then you look inside the country and it's like a treasure chest just sitting there. Unbelievably fertile farmland, tons of coal, tons of oil, everything you need to power an industrial revolution. And the best part? A whole network of huge, navigable rivers, with the Mississippi being the big one. These were like natural superhighways, perfect for moving all that stuff around.
All right, so you've got this incredible geographic foundation. It's the perfect setup, but a foundation is useless without a building on top of it. You need an engine. And that engine? It was built out of two things, people and production.
And where did the people come from? Well, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, America saw one of the biggest waves of immigration in human history. We're talking millions upon millions of people arriving, looking for opportunity. And they brought everything the country needed, the muscle, the skills, and that raw ambition to build something new. Now, it wasn't always easy. That much change, that fast, definitely caused some friction. But there's no denying it. That massive influx of people was the critical ingredient for what came next.
And all those people kicked off this incredible cycle of growth. It's pretty simple, really. You have all this new labor, which means you can build more factories and more railroads. That expansion means you can produce way more stuff, which makes things cheaper and creates a ton of wealth. You just see it happen step by step. This economic engine just revs up and transforms the US into a global industrial leader. Okay, so the foundation is solid. The engine is roaring. But what really put the foot on the gas pedal for America's rise? It was global conflict. Huge wars that basically wrecked the old world powers and left this giant power vacuum. And the first big one was World War I.
Now here's the key thing to understand. For 3 years, while the countries of Europe were literally bleeding each other dry, destroying their land, their people, their economies, the US was neutral. It stayed on the sidelines. And what was it doing? It was selling stuff to the Allies. Everything. Weapons, food, you name it. And it was loaning them massive amounts of money. So by the time the war was over, the whole global financial picture had flipped. Europe was broke and in debt to America. That one shift gave the US a huge amount of influence on the world stage.
So if World War I tipped the scales in America's favor, World War II basically locked them in place. This was it. This was the moment that truly cemented the country's future as a superpower. There's no overstating it.
I mean, the difference between what happened in the US and what happened pretty much everywhere else is just staggering. You had entire nations in Europe and Asia completely devastated. Cities turned to rubble, economies shattered, and the US mainland, not a scratch from the fighting. So while the rest of the world was trying to literally rebuild from ashes, American factories were going full throttle, pumping out an unbelievable amount of stuff for the war effort. It was a massive industrial boom.
So when the dust settled, the result was just crystal clear. There was no debate. The United States was left standing alone in a position of incredible power. It had the strongest military on the planet, and its economy wasn't just the strongest, it was miles ahead of everyone else.
So the final pieces of the puzzle weren't physical things like factories or armies. The last blocks were about ideas, about systems, about influence. See, after the war, America didn't just have power. It started to use that power to design the rules for the rest of the world. And it did this by setting up the pillars of this new world order. For example, the US dollar became the main currency for international trade, which put America right at the heart of the global economy. The US also took the lead in creating big international groups like the United Nations. Of course, being the leader meant taking on huge new responsibilities and dealing with the expectations of the entire planet.
It completely changed how America saw itself and how the world saw America.
And just as soon as this new world order was built, it was challenged. Almost immediately, a massive rivalry kicked off with the Soviet Union, the Cold War. And this competition, it pushed the U.S. into hyperdrive. It became the reason for pouring unbelievable amounts of money and effort into, well, everything.
This rivalry sparked some incredible things. You had the space race, pushing science and tech forward at a crazy speed. You had the development of nuclear power, which changed, well, everything, from energy to war. And America built this huge network of military bases all over the planet, projecting its influence everywhere. All of this just locked in its superpower status for decades to come.
So there you have it. You start with the land, add millions of people, build a giant economic engine, and then you have 2 world wars that completely reshaped the globe. That's how America's superpower status was built, block by block. Those are the things that define power in the 20th century, which really makes you wonder, right? What are the building blocks of power in the 21st century? What does it take to be a superpower now?